This episode of Resilience in Relationships is sponsored by the Set Me Free Project.
Hello and welcome to Resilience in Relationships. I'm Rebecca Saunders and I'm here with
Stephanie Olson.
and
Olivia Bergeron.
Hey, we have a guest. We're very excited.
yes, we are going to talk about some wonderful things today. But before we get started, Olivia, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a psychotherapist and a parent coach. I've been helping parents, especially moms, for over 20 years. And I come by this pretty honestly. My daughter was 2 when my twins were born. So that's when I really pivoted my work to helping parents in particular, just knowing how much support they need and how little is easily accessible. I found too, working as a psychotherapist for a while, people will come back to me saying that they're feeling stronger, but now their child is tantruming and they don't know how to handle that. Or they know what not to do, but they don't know what to do as parents. So I got trained as a parent coach as well to be able to offer that scaffolding for parents, just because sometimes, we need that support. We need that. We need to learn something that we didn't maybe get when we were growing up. So I find it's been really rewarding. And it's just something I'm very passionate about. I really love supporting parents.
That's
awesome.
That's amazing. I'm just processing this. Twins when your child was 2.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's a lot. God bless you.
Thank you. I made it. They're older teenagers now. So
that's awesome.
My kids are almost exactly 2 years apart. And that was having one baby with a 2-year-old. And that was so difficult. I can't even imagine 2 newborns.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
incredible.
I love this conversation and this type of with all 3 of us, because my kids, I have 3 kids and they're all adult children.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is going to be a great conversation. So
great. Well, I think one of the things that I would love to pick your brain about the most as a parent coach is, why do I sound like my mom sometimes? She's great, love her, but there are some times that I just hear myself and I'm like, oh my goodness, that is exactly what she used to say. Or like, it feels like I repeat things just without even thinking. And so I would love some insight on, why does that happen?
Well, I think, and I hear there's a lot of clients, I swore up and down I would never do that thing my mom said or say that thing and then out it pops. Usually when we're tired, when our child has worked our last nerve, when we just don't have the bandwidth to make changes. But I've also found that a lot of folks, there's something else that's getting in the way. And it's not knowledge. They know what they should be doing. They know what they want to be doing. But for some reason, in the moment, people feel stuck and they revert to what they know. So they revert to the behavior or the language that their own parents or their own families of origin used with them, even though it's not something they want to be doing. And yet here they are. And so I think you're certainly not alone in that, because I think that something is getting in the way. And having worked with parents, for over 2 decades, I was, it took me a while to figure out, what is that? Because it's not a knowledge issue. It's not a desire piece. So the education is certainly there. Desire is absolutely there. But something is creating a barrier. And I call it the loyalty bind. In that when we choose to do something different from what our parents did, unconsciously, it feels like we're rejecting them. And that can be really uncomfortable, because, then we respond with, well, I turned out okay. I'm not so bad. And so whatever they did must have been fine. When ultimately, with some closer consideration, and the reason that drives people to go into parent coaching or psychotherapy even, is that they want to make a change. But when there's that bind there, that when there's this difficulty to kind of overcome and supersede that desire to replicate what it is they know, it creates a lot of frustration for the parents, because they know they should be doing something else, or they know they want to be doing something else. And lo and behold, they keep going back to where they started. So the loyalty bind, I think, is really pervasive in folks that have had a history of maybe difficult parenting, difficult family experiences, where it is something that has, affected them deeply. Like I said, that's what drives them to seek out coaching or therapy. And yet, if we can get to the root of what's actually that barrier, then people can actually make lasting change. Then they can make different decisions in the moment. And I think that is really critical as well. How do we choose to change in the moment, even though this tide is kind of coming over our heads when we are stressed out, when we're burned out, when we're feeling like not at our finest as parents, certainly. And kids know where the chinks in the armor are.
Yeah.
They know exactly where, it's that, after dinner, you just want them to get to bed already, and they're refusing or they're giving us a hard time. That's what it feels like.
Yes.
I would qualify that they're actually having a hard time during those moments and not giving us a hard time, which can be hard to rationalize in the moment where we feel like, well, why are you being so, obstinate? Why aren't you just going along and making it easier on everybody by just going to bed now? And oftentimes they're doing what kids do, which is to say, they have their own agendas. Oftentimes they don't match ours. And that creates that friction, that creates that frustration. I think leads parents maybe to make those choices in the moment that aren't their finest.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's interesting that you say that, because I think sometimes one of the things that I see with parenting, especially when I'm educating parents on whatever the case may be, is that many of them don't really recognize that what they are doing is inducing trauma, or what they are doing is causing issues. And if you don't have, if you have a young child who doesn't have a voice, or even if you have teenagers who can't express what that looks like because they don't have that ability to say, okay, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm experiencing. So how do you work with parents on those kind of things when this is what they grew up with? Maybe this is what they think is the right way to parent.
Well, I think it's a great question, and that a lot of folks, again, there's a story we tell ourselves. Well, I didn't turn out so bad. I'm okay. I hear this often from when a parent comes in and they bring their partner in when there's some resistance. So they're not on the same page about parenting, and there's somebody who's got their arms crossed saying, I'm fine. Why not just do it the way my dad did it? Yelling is not a big deal. And I think that what gets in the way there is and it makes it more challenging. Is first of all, I think to your point, it's the awareness. If you're not aware, then it's really hard to make a change because you don't think there's anything to change. But I think having parents consider, okay, let's look at the outcome. Let's look at what's happening in this situation. Are you happy with what you're doing and saying? Does it feel good? And how is your child responding to that? Are they paying attention, or is everything a challenge? Is everything a hassle? Do you have to say things 10 times before they actually hear you? Do you have to cajole and bribe and push and kind of throw a tantrum yourself to get your kids to do what you're asking them to do? And so I think that if upon reflection, if people say, well, actually, yeah, this isn't really working. This isn't really how I want to parent. I don't really feel good at the end of the day. I feel like something is off, or I feel like there's got to be a different way to do this, because it's just not enjoyable. I'm not finding that, the joy in parenting that people talk about, it's just lacking. I'm not feeling that at all. And when that's the case, giving people hope and letting them know that it doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to parent in a way that you're not proud of. You don't have to look back at the end of the day and feel like, oof, that went pretty rough. And tomorrow's just going to be another day of the same thing. Rinse, wash, and repeat, right? So that I like to really give folks hope and optimism, and obviously strategies and tools too. So it's not just, pie in the sky, this will be great. I don't have a magic wand, neither do they.
Right.
But I think that's why I love working with parents, to give them really concrete, specific tools, because that is what they're lacking. They tell me, just tell me what to do in the moment. What do I say? And obviously there are no perfect words. There's no perfect behavior per se. But I do think that there are things that people can do in the moment, in the lead up, in creating connection along the way. So your child is much more likely to want to listen to you. Things are much more easy if they want to preserve that warm relationship that they have with you. If instead, mom is never on my side, dad is always pretty punitive, why should I want to listen to them? They don't have my back. And I think that if instead you flip it around and say, I have a good, warm, strong relationship with my parents. Yeah, I really don't want to brush my teeth right now, but we had just a great time a few minutes ago, playing and wrestling on the ground. I want to keep that warm feeling going. I want to keep that warm connection alive. So, okay, I'm going to go brush my teeth. And so I do think that parents tend to focus on the, how do I get them to do what I want them to do? And that to me is putting the cart before the horse, because they will do what you want more often than not if that warm connection is there. If you have a good quality relationship with your kids, which is something you can start doing today, you can start working on this right now. And that's why I love working with parents with younger kids and also with older kids, because sometimes these patterns are pretty entrenched. The relationship feels like it's pretty set in stone, but it's not. You can always choose to change.
I love that. And I think that's so important to remember, that just because you've maybe been stuck in a pattern for a short time or a long time, you can always switch it up. There's always hope for the future. And so I love that that's something that you're intentional about, is instilling that hope in the families you work with. So you mentioned having practical steps and that you work with families on that. And I know there's no one size fits all, because if there was, you'd be rich and all the world's problems would be solved. But what are some things that you've found that are pretty common in families that work well?
Well, first of all, the preventive maintenance, I think, is key. So developing that relationship, laughing with your kids. playing with them. I don't care what the ages are. If you laugh and you play together, that warm relationship, that feeling of connection, I think is so important to getting your kid to want to, like I said, go along with what you're asking them to do, even if they're not so keen to do it. But another tool that I give to families and to parents in the moment, because sometimes we just need something to, kind of pull the breaker. I just need to interrupt what's going on. I can see where things are headed. I don't like it. But if you don't have the tools to pull the brakes, then inevitably, you keep the slide continues and you keep, replicating what's happened in the past, even if, it's not really working, but you don't have any other tools at hand. So one thing I like to show parents is SSS, stop, soften, see. So in the moment when you feel like, oh, I feel like I'm getting in your stomach, in your shoulders, you can feel physically that things are not headed the way you want them to. You're about to yell, or maybe you already have yelled, or you're about to do or say something that you will likely regret, or maybe you're in the process of doing that. Stopping. That means hitting the pause button. Slowing things down, I think, is critical because in those moments, things go pretty fast. We go from 0 to 60, so do our kids. Everybody gets ramped up. And then before you know it, instead of throwing water on their fire, you're throwing gas. And your kid needs to, borrow your calm, is what I call it. So if you are able to stop, get composure, then that means, again, putting your hand over your mouth if you have to, if you're about to yell something, but even just rolling out your shoulders, taking up more space. We get small and tight when we go into fight or flight. Instead, stretching out, taking up more room, slowing things down. So a nice deep breath or a few can be helpful. Next is soften. Oftentimes in that moment, we feel like the child is the enemy or our partner is the enemy. These people that we love, we know that we love them intellectually, but in our hearts in that moment, it feels like, gosh, this person is like just out to get me. Or why are they giving me such a hard time? And I think if you're able to instead tap into your love for this person, remember them as a baby, cradling your child in your arms, smelling that wonderful baby smell, harkening back to the sensation that this person needs me when they're behaving at their worst is when they need me the most. And so that kind of softening towards them allows you to see. That's the last S. Having the perspective. Okay, what is their point of view? I might not agree with it. Maybe my child wants to stay up until midnight every night. I know that there's school the next day. Not the best idea. But I can understand they want to stay up and, chat with their friends online or do whatever. I get it. I don't agree. I'm not saying you have to agree at all. But you can understand. Okay, I see your point of view. I see your perspective. Once you have that sense of slowing things down, softening your body, softening your heart, seeing their point of view, then you can go, instead of this is a big problem, then we move to problem solving. How do we work together to resolve this? Now, mind you, you are still the parent. You are still in charge. I'm not saying you cede responsibility to your child to decide at all. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. You are still in charge as a parent. But how do you work with your child as opposed to against them? How do you come up with a win-win solution? Because, okay, I understand you want to stay up late. I get it. And not tonight. Tonight is a school night. Tomorrow you can stay up an extra half hour because it's Friday. I think you can work out certain solutions, but I think if you are coming at them as opposed to alongside them, much more challenging to do. Because when we feel somebody's attacking us, especially if you have young children and you're twice as big as they are, they're going to go into their own fight or flight or freeze. They're probably going to push back. They're not going to be easy going about, doing what you say. So that is really at its core. I think if you can use SSS, that does help you pull that breaker so you can stop and you can slow things down. And then you can choose to parent in a way that you'll be proud of. You can make a decision in the moment that's conscientious and conscious, knowing that, okay, this is who I want to be. I don't want to be somebody loud and angry and frustrated all the time or disappointed in myself and disappointed in my child. That doesn't feel good for you or for your kid. And so I do think that it's really about being more self-aware and then choosing to parent differently. And also, frankly, having the tools at hand to do that. Again, if you know you want to, but you don't know how, then that to me, that's a huge gap. So I really help parents fill that gap.
I really like that.
Yeah.
Like that a lot.
That this episode of Resilience in Relationships is sponsored by the Set Me Free Project. At the Set Me Free Project, we believe that prevention is powerful. And through our Ready to Stand curriculum, we equip youth, parents, educators, and industry professionals of all kinds with the tools to recognize human trafficking, navigate digital spaces safely, and build healthy relationships before exploitation can occur. Our mission at the Set Me Free Project is to stop human trafficking before it starts by providing prevention education to all ages. I think a lot of times parents feel like, well, I can't apologize if I've done something wrong because that will, make my leadership look. Can you speak to that? Because I found that one of the most important things that really strengthened the relationship with my children was when I was wrong, admitting it, letting them know, and apologizing to them.
I think that is one of the best things that you can do. And I think oftentimes, we expect our kids to apologize to other people, apologize to us, apologize to their peers at the park, but they don't know how because nobody's modeled it for them. So if you frog march your kid to the other child and say, all right, say sorry, sorry, it's not really genuine. It doesn't really have an impact because, it's just words. Whereas instead, I do think if you model, you take responsibility. Oof, you know what? That didn't come out the way I really wanted it to. I'm sorry. No one should ever be yelled at. I'm working on it. Let me rephrase it and saying it again. But unless you model that, your child doesn't automatically know how to do this. I think sometimes we expect our kids just to know how to do, how to behave in a certain way when they haven't actually seen it, which is a huge ask for a person whose brain is not mature. And their brains don't mature until they're about 25, right? So for better or for worse. So I do think that as parents, modeling how to apologize is key. And it's not a question of obviating your authority. It is instead showing that this is what a responsible person does. This is what a responsible leader does. They take ownership. That's part of being a leader and part of being a parent is that I can admit when I made a mistake and I work on the repair. What am I going to do differently next time? What am I going to do right now to make this better? Because ultimately that is what we want our kids to do, right? We want them to be able to own up, take responsibility, not shirk it, not hide it, not point to somebody else and say it's their fault. No, we want them to say, okay, I messed up. And I'm not pretending that I did. I'm not coming up with excuses for why I did. I mean, I think the excuse giving is pretty pervasive in this culture. It's not my fault. I did it because I had to, or they made me do it, which I think really sends the wrong message because we all make mistakes. And I think, to your point about we somehow feel this need to present as if we were perfect when you're not. And if you show your child that somehow mom or dad are perfect, they're perfect people, then how do you think they feel? I must be really bad. Mom and dad is perfect and I make this big mistake.
That's a great
Oof,
point.
I must be rotten. I must be like just completely a bad person. And people who feel like they're bad will behave badly. So ultimately, we want our kids to know that I love you. I don't love the behavior all the time, and I love you. That part is not up for question. And instead, I think this: if your child feels like, well, I need to behave in a certain way in order to be lovable, and if I make a mistake, that means I'm not lovable. Again, I think that's sending the opposite message that we want to as parents, but sometimes we do it anyway, inadvertently. And I think that does set our kids up for difficulty because, again, they will make mistakes. So will we. There is no perfect parenting. There's no perfect kid. We as parents need to own up and acknowledge, okay, I am a work in progress, and so are you, and that is okay. Doesn't make me any less lovable or you any less lovable. So that I think is an important message for parents to convey to their kids, just because I do think that there is this strong desire, I think, to present as if, we are the know all, everything, the buck stops with us. We're perfect people. We know everything. We know how to do everything. We don't make any mistakes. And that just sends absolutely the wrong message.
Great points.
I think that a lot of people listening right now are probably taking notes. I know that I'm going to listen back to this and take my own notes too. But one of the things that popped in my mind is, okay, I want to love my children. And if I have examples of that, I can see what love looks like. What if you grew up in a family where love wasn't really expressed and it feels uncomfortable or awkward? How do you start kind of getting yourself used to expressing love for your kids?
It's a great question. And I think when we do something for the first time, we don't feel like we're so great at it. It doesn't feel very comfortable. And yet, whether that's riding a bike or learning a new skill or new task or doing something for the first time. But I think we know, again, intellectually, if we persevere, it gets easier. It becomes more comfortable. It becomes more natural. And I think you can cast about for people in your own life that maybe, let me look at their relationship with their child or their parent. Let me see what that looks like. Let me see if I can kind of model my own behavior on that. That can be helpful to have somebody who's actually kind of in mind when you're trying to interact with somebody in a different way. But know that that's why when sometimes people will ask me, like, can you give me the words to say? What do I say in this moment? And I give them, an idea, but it's not a script. And I think it doesn't feel very natural for them because, those aren't their words. That's not how they would put it. So I do encourage people to take the time to, put it into your own language, put it into your own words, but you say it in a way that feels comfortable and real for you because kids will sniff that out. If you are saying something that sounds kind of awkward and mom doesn't sound like, she sounds kind of strange when she says that, that's not usually how she would speak. Kids will push back. And, if you have kids that are slightly older, particularly preteens and teens, the antenna is up and they will know that, where's that coming from? Did you read a book or something? Did you listen to a podcast? Did your therapist tell you that? So I do feel that it can be really challenging to do something different, but that's why, maybe even scripting it out yourself. What is it I want to say in those moments? I'm all about coping ahead. If there's a situation that keeps recurring, maybe it's a time of day or a certain situation that you and your kid just butt heads over, how is it that you want to behave? What are some things that you would like to say, ideally? And once you have that, obviously it's not a script that you're writing out for yourself, but I think if there is a way for you to get more comfortable, get more familiar, have that language be a little more natural for you, a little more at your fingertips, that can be helpful. But I think giving yourself some grace, knowing that, again, when you do something for the first time, when you're trying to make a change, it can feel awkward. It can feel, like it's not quite you yet. It's not quite natural yet. But I do emphasize the yet, because you will get there with practice. You will get there over time. And hopefully it won't take that long.
So, do you have any advice for parents who might be on the other side of the coin? So, like, love is easy to express. We have a great time, but maybe boundaries are harder.
Yeah, I think that, there's that spectrum of parenting. So there's permissive and punitive. In the middle, there's authoritative. So I think a lot of parents that are very permissive, we want our kids to love us. We don't want to say no. We want to give them what they ask, or maybe we waited a long time to have a child. So for us, this is really important to make sure our child feels love, and we associate that with being, by saying yes to pretty much whatever they want. Unfortunately, that has a downside, because then your child learns that, mom doesn't trust me to be able to handle boundaries and rules. That also sets your child up for challenges going forward when they interact with other people, other adults, notably at school, for instance, teachers. When the teacher is asking them to do something and they have a real hard time listening to or paying attention to or following directions. And that, to me, it's a life skill to be able to listen to what people are saying and to follow their lead and to take direction. So I do think that for parents that they tend to err on the side of permissiveness, understanding that your child does need boundaries. They need to know that you are in charge, that you are the captain of the ship. And it doesn't mean you have to be harsh, but I think you can set boundaries with love. I think you can set limits lovingly. You don't have to be a jerk about it. You don't have to be, again, somebody who's not kind. And I think that comes from, to me, it's empathy. I understand you want to stay up later, and not but, and it's bedtime. So do you want to walk like a duck or walk like a chicken on the way to bed? You kind of give them a little bit of choice. You make it kind of funny. You turn it into a game. That can help. Doing something but you are still setting the boundaries. I think giving kids choice is a really nice way to get them on board, because then they have agency. Then it's, okay, I made a decision. Okay, I'm going to walk like a duck. Great. You don't care if they walk like a duck or a chicken. No big deal to you as long as they're getting to bed. Same thing. Do you want to brush your teeth or wash your face first? You're doing both, but you get to pick which one. So I think that that is a way to ease away from being more permissive into being a way that's more authoritative, not authoritarian, but authoritative with your kids, because it feels comfortable to know that there are somebody's kind of setting some rules. They will push back to make sure those rules are still there. Don't get me wrong. They will test boundaries to make sure, are they still holding those boundaries? But ultimately, it makes kids feel safe. All right, I know somebody is in charge. I know I'm not the one in charge. My parents are. And that allows me to be a kid. That allows me to do the things developmentally that I need to do, as opposed to worrying about, being the one that's in charge and calling the shots.
I think that's such an important point, because when we teach on things like human trafficking, and we're specifically talking to parents and caregivers, one of the things that we talk about is it is so important for our kiddos to be able to make choices. And because so many survivors, people who are experiencing sexual abuse, or who are experiencing human trafficking, or whatever the case may be, don't get to have choices. And so to set them up for success and give them that autonomy, give them the agency to know, yes, you get to choose certain things, but it doesn't have to be, you get to choose whatever you want to wear. We used to jokingly call my middle daughter Cyndi Lauper, because the ways she came out of her bedroom when she was in elementary school were shocking. But to say, yes, do you want to wear this or this? And you get to choose. So I think that's such an important point.
I think it is important to, again, provide some limits in terms of the choice. In other words, there has to be options that are okay for you, with
Right.
you. And ultimately, then your child gets to choose A or B, but not A to Z.
Right.
I think that's one of the things that I have learned over time. When my kids, I was going to say when they're still little, when they were a little bit younger than they are now, I just was really excited to let them choose their own things. And then I realized I feel like my daughter is having like decision fatigue. Like I'm giving her too much. And when I started limiting it again, she was happier. And that was such a cool thing that I didn't expect them. Like you do want actually a smaller box, and that's okay.
Yeah, the kind of perseveration about, like, there's so many choices, which you could pick anything out of her closet to wear. That's overwhelming for a lot of people, kids and adults too, maybe. But I do
Yes.
think for a child, if you're able to kind of set the limits that are fine with you, that you approve of first, and then they get to choose, again, A or B, that can be really helpful, because then they feel like, oh, I have agency. I got to choose this outfit, obviously with your help.
That reminds me of a story one of our collaborative partners tells. She was working with a survivor of human trafficking, and she was trying to get this individual out of state. And so during the time that she was waiting for that ability to get her into another location, she was really working with her very closely. She may I think she put her up in housing or whatever the case may be. And this constantly berating her, saying, "You're terrible, you're, calling her names, you hate me," all of this stuff. And then at the end, when she was getting ready to board her bus or whatever it was, she turned to her and said, "I wish you were my mom." And our partner said, "I Why? Because you have been telling me nothing but how horrible I am and all of this stuff." And she said, "You are the first person who has told me no out of love and really cared about what I needed." And I think, to your point about boundaries, those are important. We need boundaries. Our kids need boundaries. People in our lives need boundaries. And I think when you set your children up with boundaries, growing up and saying, "This is what we're going to do, this is not what we're going to do," you really are showing love. That is what you're showing. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think as long as it's done with empathy, that to me is key. Like I'm saying no to you, and I understand where you're coming from. That doesn't mean I'm going to change my mind, but I see your point of view, and I understand that for you seems like a great idea, and that's not what we're going to do right now.
So I feel like I have asked a lot of questions. Stephanie, did you have any questions for Olivia?
Yeah, I feel like I have as well. I love what you're doing. I think it's so
Yes.
needed. And parents of all ages, parents parenting all ages, it's so important because every chapter is different. And we all walk into the next chapter and say, "Okay, how do I do this?" I think that's fabulous. Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank you. And if any of our listeners out there wanted to get connected with you, how could they do that?
Sure, you can reach out to me through my website, mommygroove.com. I'm also on the socials at mommygroove, so people are welcome to reach me there.
So, did you have any closing thoughts for us?
Well, first of all, thank you again for having me here. It's a real pleasure. It's an honor. I think that parents have such a hard job, and I think nobody realizes how challenging it is, except other parents maybe. And even then, we forget. We forget how hard it is to have a baby and then a toddler, and then because as we move through the stages ourselves with our kids. But I would really urge parents to have some grace for themselves and to know that this is challenging, and to be able to understand that this is there's no arriving at some kind of a place where you're a perfect parent. We're all on the journey, and we're all learning all on the way. And I think that if we can look at it, I'm a visual person, so I imagine our parents passed us a baton. Now we're running forward and we're going to pass the baton to our kids. And so hopefully we're improving on each generation. We're improving on each iteration of us as parents. And I think that urging parents to getting help, getting support is not a weakness, it's a strength. Your kid needs you to be in a good place mentally, physically, and having the skills at hand just really helps everybody. So when you're feeling better, when you're feeling strong, everybody around you benefits.
It's beautiful.
Well, thank you so much. It has been amazing to have you on. Thank you to everyone who is listening. I will be linking Olivia's information in the show notes so you can see that. And while you're logged on to wherever you get podcasts, go ahead and rate our show if you wouldn't mind. That would be so helpful to us and to help us show up to even more people. So, with that, have a great rest of your day. Go get some more.